are leaders born or are they made? And if we have to be as extraordinary as these gentlemen and women, of course, who are comparable, then that's not very promising. That doesn't give a lot of hope, and it raises important questions for companies about what you do to cultivate leaders. But I don't believe that you do need to be born exceptional. My view, and this is supported by our research, is that there is a very small group that we call the leaders regardless. They don't need cultivation. They don't need development. They were born to lead. And if you're lucky enough to have one or two in your organization, you'll get a lot of leadership out of them. The vast majority of people who eventually become leaders were not, I think, born exceptional. But they were born with potential. They had enough IQ, EQ, energy, drive, collaboration skills, or what have you, that they had some raw potential which was pretty good. And then some series of experiences occurred which allowed them to develop those raw materials into being effective leaders. And we'll talk about what those experiences are. So from a company point of view, we think the talent pool question is really about this group. I don't know what the percentage is. I call them the 9%. I actually don't know what the real numbers are. But they're those who have enough skills and capabilities to likely become effective leaders, but who will need some development and some unlocking and some growth in order to achieve that. And the question is, what does that development look like? And what helps them most to develop? We started to ask a question about what was the growth rate in their leadership skill at different times, and how did that correspond to the experiences that they were having. In short, we asked the question, what is the key to unlocking leadership potential in the 9%? And here's what we found out. It wasn't coaching. I'm a coach. I'd love to say that coaching is a powerful unlocker of leadership. Unfortunately, I think it's more of a polisher. If you give me a group of leaders to work with as a coach, I believe I can make them more effective. If you give me a group of managers, on balance, I think I can make them more effective. But if you give me a group of managers and say, coach them to become transformational leaders, unfortunately, I just don't think it works that way. And the executives we interviewed also felt that their leadership had come from different types of experiences, not predominantly from coaching or mentoring. The second thing we discovered is that there was no recipe for leadership, and there was no recipe for how they became leaders, that they all described very different types of life histories. It wasn't that they had all gotten MBAs or worked in strategy consulting and then gone on to be an entrepreneur. Their life stories were very, very different, and there was no simple formula or recipe to follow. And the third thing we discovered is that it was not based on classroom experience. Many had done higher education, including in business, or had done specifically leadership development courses. Most had not. And neither group indicated that that was really the essential difference in their leadership. What they did talk about was a very unique experience which came out when we plotted their leadership lifeline. And we compiled similar graphs for all of the 60 executives that we interviewed, and identified and asked them to explore what were the sort of peak periods and what was going on in their lives at that time. And this is what we found. That they all described an experience which was pretty intense, frankly. One in which they felt kind of really far out of their comfort zone. It was not just a continuation of their normal professional experience. It felt different than the 5 years previous and the 5 years hence. And one of the ways it felt different is that they were working on something that they really didn't understand very well. They were being faced with a problem which they were not very expert in. And they were being asked to take primary responsibility for solving a problem that they had never solved before. The second thing that they talked about was the speed, the pressure, the need to make decisions on the fly, to form teams and coalesce people around new ideas very, very rapidly, and the limited time for analysis and reflection. And the third thing they talked about was the fact that they felt a lot of autonomy, that they were not being carefully managed during this period, that they had freedom and the freedom to fail, and they were very aware of that freedom to fail and the possibility of failure. And it unlocked a degree of energy, of creative thinking, of intellectual spark, of physical energy, and I think partly attributable to the fact that there were very real consequences and a lot of risk and a lot of uncertainty associated with these types of projects. So one of the factors that seems to be at play here is almost a physical transformation that takes place during these periods where, well, it's my word, not theirs, I don't think they would use it, but I call them superpowers, where people feel more capable, more bright, more creative, more engaging, willing to do things that were maybe a little bit beyond where they would have been willing to go under more normal circumstances. But some combination of the pressure and the adrenaline and the excitement of these type of big ride experiences brought out in them a way of behaving that was different than what they would have done in a normal managerial capacity. And not all of that worked, but over the course of these big ride experiences, what they discovered is they grew, they literally stretched. They had more capacities. They could do more things. They could be bolder than they had thought they could before. And in that process, their self-conception changed. Because when the big ride came to an end, they didn't stop behaving like this. They thought, oh, I can do this now. These are skills and capabilities that I have. And I can use them to build teams in a project that I'm working on, which is maybe less of an intense, crazed, big ride, more of an ordinary professional experience. But I have new skills. I have new capacities. So these experiences showed up pretty consistently across the interview pool that we spoke with. And we were trying to distill what were the essential elements of these experiences. And we think we've got it. And it's a very simple framework. And it's actually a little surprising to me because it didn't have some of the elements that I thought it would.